Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching my next interview here on William Wallace for America. I am with Pastor Broden right now, and I think you're going to find a lot of unique information from him too. Thanks for tuning in. Pastor, how are you doing tonight?
Well, doing fantastic. Glad to be with you this evening.
Well, Pastor, I got to tell you, I'm finding out, when you start researching people who are passionate about our community, because I've always said the best way to fix our country is to start an own community. I saw you as somebody that's doing some really unique things to solve problems in your own and issues, I'll say, in your own community. But the things you like to talk about looks like it's about political correctness and cultural Marxism in the church. And I go on and on and on, but I want to bring you on. What do you like to talk about the most on what you're doing to fix problems in your community?
Well, I think what's happening in our community, the Black community, is something that is true about what's happening across America. There is a deliberate attempt on the part of the liberal left, as represented in the Democratic Party, to undermine our Judeo-Christian heritage and the liberties that we have guaranteed to us by the Constitution. And so that is playing itself out in our community. And unfortunately, the liberal left and the socialists in particular have found that the poor, or those who are on the lower end of the culture, are their best allies to push their agenda into the public square. What do I mean by that? I mean that Saul Alinsky and the Marxists said very clearly that we'll use the poor as a battering ram against the system in order to bring the system down. We'll go in to those communities and organize them around the issues that we bring to them, and cause them to rally around those issues and vote for candidates that we put up that will go into the government and begin to push their agenda into um, uh, our, uh, our laws and our policies that govern who we are as a nation. So our community is most vulnerable to that, in that they have found a way to manipulate our communities and to arouse our emotions on issues related to race. As you well know, the Black experience in America comes out of a slave experience, and there's been a fight and a push in our community for uh, civil rights and for equal access to the system and to fight against Jim Crow laws. Well, in many instances, those things have been overcome through the civil rights legislation and through the work of the civil rights movement during the 50s and the 60s that opened up the door for equal access. However, the left continues to bring up issues of the past and open up wounds, pulling scabs off of bad wounds that take place, looking at issues of the tension between the police and our community, and use that to rally us to vote for their candidates. And we've been bamboozled and
Mhm.
manipulated into doing just that.
You
And
know,
as a
I
result of
told,
that, and I want you to hear me on this,
sure.
and as a result of that, our country is facing a transformation because of 90% of the votes that are coming out of our community are putting these socialists and these communists into office. And then they get into office, they seek to undermine our Constitution. And we are somewhat blindly responsible for that, in that we have been bamboozled into voting for them for almost 30 years, and they have produced nothing in return for helping our or aiding our community at all. We've been suckered.
The policies, if you look back during the Lyndon Baines Johnson days, the policies of the the movements to what they said to help the Black community, where they took fathers out of the home, I think was one of the most detrimental things they did to the Black community. The policies in the New Deal, not only took families away from Black people, but it took away. I'll say it like this. Let me go from a different direction. You know, before the 50s and 60s, the Black community had a high entrepreneurial rate. They had a high success rate when it came to education. They had the lowest rate of divorces. But then along comes a New Deal. They take fathers out of the home. They made promises to the Black community, and instead they created policies that destroyed the Black community. And now what happens is I think they were able to control the Black community for several generations. But now that I think that the Black community is waking up to the oppression of the liberal left Democrat Party that is creating narratives to control them, and they're waking up to their desire for freedom and liberty and finding it with not only the conservative movement, but aligning themselves with more Republicans. The Democrats have created new narratives to try to put them back to those same policies that controlled them before, like, for instance, CRT. I brought this up in the last interview that it's amazing how now CRT comes up at a time when the Black community is moving more towards conservatism and back to the Republican Party for the same ideologies of freedom and liberty that we've been professing for a long time. Does this sound like something you might agree with or that you think?
I think it is a perspective that has some relevancy because there's some truth to it. But the greater problem I think exists within our community that there has been a spiritual disconnect from our relationship with our God, and we have been susceptible to and seduced by
Mhm.
a human secularistic philosophy that's sourced in men and women who hate God. And we have been sucked into that philosophy and we have bought into it hook, line, and sinker. You referred to an article that I wrote called The Feminization of the Black Community. The Pied Pipers of betrayal are Black
Mhm.
leaders within our community. And they have bought in to the agenda of the socialist because they have been promised positions, power, and money, and they have sold us out. So our community has a greater problem. And I think there has been some change, some movement, and it's minuscule when we look at the larger movement that is happening in our community. There are some who are waking up, no question about it. There's always been a Black conservative um, mindset within our community, uh, but it does not have the same platform and the same access to the public square that the left has given to those who are selling our community out. In other words, the media has censored the conservative Black voice. And unfortunately, may I say to you, Wallace, that too many conservative media outlets ignore the Black conservative. They don't have them on their show.
That's
They
right.
don't talk to them. They don't support them. They don't financially invest in their efforts to try to rescue this republic through changing hearts and minds in our community. And so we are the biggest ignored group, censored group in America. And most people don't even recognize that or acknowledge that. The Black conservative and his voice has been marginalized and negated in
Mhm.
the community. So we don't have access even to our own community to the extent that the liberals do. The liberals are pouring money, finances, and giving promises to Black leaders and pastors in our community, and they're being sucked
Mhm.
into that promise, and they are becoming the vocal piece and the mouthpiece for the
Mhm.
agenda on the left.
And what's interesting is, I always say that I get that what one of the things I'm upset about with the Republican Party is that they stole the word conservatism. And I don't mean that in a so much negative way that it's a bad thing, because I always say, well, the liberals stole, or the Democrats stole the word liberal. And if you go back to neoclassical liberalism, it describes more conservative values. Well, the Republicans have now stolen the word conservatism, and they make it their flag, or their flag to wave. when the reality is that conservative values don't know a party, they don't know a race, they
Mhm.
don't know a gender. And so if we find ways to unite more people on conservative values, we all win. And I like what you said, how, the narratives and the media shuts down the Black conservative voice as saying, wait a minute, if you're not a Democrat, or if you're waving the conservative flag, then you're really siding with them. So you must be, one of them instead of where you need to be type
Well,
person.
you heard what Joe Biden said. He said, if you don't vote Democrat, you're not Black.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
an incredible, audacious statement made by a man who has been responsible for a lot of racist policies and
Mhm.
statements that come out of his mouth.
Let's
But we
not to
don't
forget
hold him accountable to that because he's a Democrat. And I think
the,
that's so unfortunate.
the crime
Now,
bill of
back
the
to,
crime bill of the 80s, and
right.
when not the crime bill of the 80s, but also, when he said that he didn't want his children going to integrated schools.
Right,
And
exactly. It's been documented clearly, and so we're not making these things up. But uh, when you talk about critical race theory is birthed out of critical theory. Critical theory is that which was crafted and developed in 1929 in the Frankfurt School in Germany, where the design of critical theory had one thing in mind, and that is to critique everything that comes out of the West that supports the values and its policies. The social theory oriented towards criticizing and changing society as a whole. So they're looking to change society. Critical race theory is but an umbrella or a branch out of critical theory with the same ambition and the same design to undermine and to change the culture. So it is a tool in the toolbox of the liberal left and of the socialists in America to change America, to undermine our Constitution. And so what we have in the toolbox, cultural Marxism, which is political correctness. We have liberation theology. That's a part of the tools in the toolbox of the Marxists. And we have cancel culture, and we have all kinds of philosophies that are designed to divide us and separate us and cause chaos and confusion. Chaos is the socialist's best friend, for out of
right.
chaos comes change, and they're seeking to change America. You see, we need to return to the fundamental truths that undergird who we are as a nation. I think it was Matthew Spalding. I don't know if you know that name, Matthew
You're
Spalding.
not
He wrote a book called We Still Hold These Truths. We Still Hold These Truths. It's an excellent book. You got to go get the book and read it. It's done back in 2009, 2010. I read it and was moved by it because what he did effectively in that book was to identify the founding principles that made this nation great,
That's right.
the principles that were responsible for the birth of this nation. And there are 10 of them. And I would suggest to you that the remedy to the kind of melees and madness that we see taking place in the public square today is a return to a Judeo-Christian ethic as presented in the Holy Scripture, 66
Mhm.
books penned by 40 different authors, the Word and Mind of God, and to reconnect to those 10 founding principles. Most Americans don't even know what those principles are.
What are those founding principles?
Liberty, equality, natural rights, consent of the governed, religious freedom, private property, the rule of law, constitutionalism, self government, and independence. Those
Love it.
ideas were at the beginning of this nation.
Mhm.
And those ideas come from Scripture.
That's
See,
right.
America was founded on a religious based heritage of liberty under law, and the Constitution was written to limit the government. That has been flipped on its head. We have turned against the Judeo Christian principles that established for us
Mhm.
morality in the public square. When you say morality, we're talking about that which is right versus that which is wrong.
Right, exactly.
And now we have an expanded government who is interfering with every aspect of our lives. We can't buy light bulbs the toilet stool that we're supposed to buy. We can't grow gardens in our backyard. We can't collect rainwater without the government having to okay it or giving us some authority to do so. That's not the liberty that our founding fathers crafted
And
this nation on.
And isn't it interesting that when you can't collect rainwater is generally because the government has through the years used things like eminent domain to build well, not eminent domain, but they've used all kinds of things to be able to redirect water through population growth, through the roads and bridges, through the dams, and they've redirected water in a way or controlled it in a way that now they don't want you to be able to control it, which that's just one example of probably thousands of how the government has manipulated things and try to control things over the time and then try to control how you're doing things now.
Right. And I submit to you, it's being rightly connected to those principles. And we need to be teaching them to our children. They don't know about it. They're not learning it in schools, in these Luciferian institutions of indoctrination. They're indoctrinating our children away from the Judeo-Christian ethic that undergirds this nation.
Mm-hmm.
And they are embracing a human secularism. And by the way, uh, it was Antonio Gramsci that made it clear that economic Marxism would not be the means by which to overthrow the West. And that's how they crafted this thing called cultural Marxism, which came to America as political correctness.
Mm-hmm.
And his vision was to infiltrate all of the major institutions that influence us. And there are 7 of them. There are 7 institutions. Of course, there is academia,
Mm-hmm.
and there is business and corporations. That's 2. Then we have the arts, and then we have the government, major media, and that leaves us with 2, the family and the church.
Mm.
And may I submit to you tonight that all 7 of those institutions have been infiltrated
That's right.
and through the means of gradualism have changed this nation into a godless nation, Baal worshipers, Moloch worshipers, and
Mm.
haters of God. For all the philosophies that govern us today were crafted by men and women who hated God. Darwinism, Marxism, socialism, communism, human secularism, and
Mm-hmm.
feminism, all created by men and women who hated God and were not ashamed to say so. Karl Marx says, my goal in life is to dethrone God and to destroy capitalism. Am I the only one seeing that?
Exactly
Am I
right.
the only one seeing that?
I'm seeing it happen right before my own eyes.
Right. And our kids are being indoctrinated with that philosophy. It was Joseph Stalin who said this. He said, America is like a healthy body. Its strength is in its patriotism and its spiritual life and its morality. If we can undermine them in those 3 areas, America will collapse from within.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll say to you tonight, take a look at those 3 areas in America. Patriotism, most people are afraid to stand up and say that they're patriots. Now, I know that there are some, but when they do, they get ridiculed. Their jobs are
Right.
in danger. They may get fired or get on a list where they can't get promotions and so forth and so on. So they don't raise the flag. They don't say, I'm proud to be American like they used to.
Mm-hmm.
Not like they used to. To be a patriot in America is to
Right.
be a closet patriot almost.
Closet
And then
patriot.
take
I
a
like
look at
that
the
one.
spiritual life. Take a look at the spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual life is best reflected in our children. Most of them don't want to have anything to do with Christianity because of the misrepresentation of Christianity by so many who are cultural Christians and not biblical Christians, and they don't want to have it. They'll put up their hands, say, talk to the hand, because the face don't understand. We don't want to hear nothing
Mm-hmm.
about Jesus or the Bible. Look at all you hypocrites. And so our spiritual life is in trouble in America. And we see that in same-sex marriage. We see it in gender fluidity. We see it in transgenderism and the redefinition of pedophilia as a choice and not a mental illness.
Right.
And
It's
then the final
amazing.
one is morality.
And what's even more worrisome is the fact that they're making that to be more normal. They want it to be more normal than a mental illness. And there's actually people that are talking public about normalizing it. There's groups that are trying to normalize it, and I think
Well,
it's one of
all you have to do is take a look at California. It's been passed that it is no longer uh, an offense or illegal for a 21-year-old boy to have sexual relationship with a 13 or 12-year-old girl.
Are you
Right
serious?
now in California, they're not waiting on it. California is the cow, what they call the bell cow,
The bellwether.
the bellwether. I think it's it has something to do with a cow too, with the bell on. But
Yeah.
that is sounding the alarm, and they're selling to the rest of America, and I'm sure New York is close behind.
So
That in
what's
between,
the law? What is the law
we're
that
softening
California
our
passed?
position on pedophilia. We're
What
just
what
softening.
what did California pass recently?
I think it was a bill, and it was here passed in the last several weeks. A bill that allowed that it was no longer a criminal offense for an adult to have sexual relationship with a minor.
That's
That's
disgusting.
that's I'll have to find that, but I'm sure if you Google it, you can get it very quickly.
Right. Yeah, I want to Google that. So,
Yeah, I
you
think you
know,
need to know about it and let your listeners know about it.
well, it's also what's happening in our southern border, Pastor. You know, they're talking about how many immigrants are coming across
Mhm.
the border that are for drugs and illegal activity and human trafficking. But one of the stories that you're hearing more and more about is that some of these human traffickers are bringing children across for that purpose, and nobody's talking about that. Nobody's trying to protect our children. They're trying to normalize that behavior instead of working harder to protect our children. There's nothing normal about hurting a child. And then, when you talk about the age of 18 years old, anything underneath that, they're trying to take that barrier down. And I agree with you 100%, Pastor, that it's just disgusting, and that we need to do more to fight for our children instead of accepting PC culture as a way to phase into this new type of things.
Yeah, there's a context, I think, that explains a lot of this deviant behavior. Uh, there's a deliberate attempt on the part of the power elite to radically change or to implement what they call a global reset.
Mhm.
And the global reset means that they have to get rid of certain values that govern who we are. Number one, they want to remove the Judeo Christian influence from the public square. I think they've just about got that completed. The other thing is to change uh, the economy of our nation. And part of the way to do that is to flood the economy with these illegal immigrants who are coming over
Mhm.
and redirecting the public or the national treasure to helping them and causing our economy to crumble. Uh, this is not by accident, it's by design. So what we see is a deliberate attempt, and especially by this administration, to wreck this economy for
Mhm.
one purpose: to establish a global reset, that they may implement their strategy for a new world government. And we've got to remember that what we're seeing is not organic. It is manufactured crises for a purpose: to take down the Judeo Christian influence and to destroy our Constitution. And
So do
quite
you
frankly,
Go
I
ahead.
think they're a long ways down the road of doing that.
So do you think that that some of this political correctness, some of this we talk about critical race theory, you talk about critical theory, and you talk about the great reset, do you think that they see the black community as as an important integral part of changing or using the black community in their narratives to help bring in this new great reset? Do you think that that's
Only to the extent, now listen, only to the extent that they can get us voting for them. And that's they're exploiting us and using us. They're the pimp and we're the prostitutes. They're pimping our community for our votes. And they promise all kinds of things to the community, and we vote for them. They get in office and do nothing but advance their agenda to undermine our Constitution. So we are contributing to the demise of this nation, not willingly, or rather knowingly, because we don't know. We're being manipulated. We're being deceived.
Well, they've
And
manipulated
it's spiritual,
the
Wallace.
narratives that,
Wallace, it's spiritual.
yeah. They've done it through narratives, and they've done it through the government programs to give
Yes.
people just enough food scraps to keep them
Right.
under the table, to be able to control their freedoms and liberties, to be able to keep them in
Exactly.
office, to achieve their all-time objective of not only the Great Reset, but just in general for their to keep themselves in office.
Right.
Even
To
the
keep
even
to achieve power.
That's right.
It was Saul Alinsky who said to his class as he was teaching them about his strategy, he says, "Why do we organize?" And they came up with all of these philanthropical ideas and stuff. He said, "No, we organize for power. We want power because power they can cause change." Now,
Mhm.
listen, what you just said about how they use the government largesse to feed people and to give them money. It's like a dope dealer. He gives you dope, gets you strung out on the dope.
That's right.
Then you're his. He can make you do anything and be anything that he wants you to be because he's in control. He controls the source of
Mhm.
your addiction. And they created an addiction in our community through welfare and government programs, housing programs, healthcare, you name it. And we're
Mhm.
all dependent on the government phones. They're giving out government phones now, government iPads.
Right?
We're doing all that. That's like the
I didn't know about the
drug.
iPads.
Yeah, that's like the drug that they use to keep people addicted
Mhm.
and voting for them. And as they vote for them, they get in office not to help people, but to advance their agenda.
But,
And they
Pastor,
have done a very good job in advancing their agenda in America right now.
we keep talking about voting, but the other problem that we're having in our country is that they don't need our votes anymore to keep themselves in power because they've got electronic machines that they
Right.
can control. Because remember,
Right.
it's the ones who count the votes that control the country.
Right. Exactly.
You
So
know,
now they don't need us as much. Now watch how they abuse the black community now.
now I've
They
had
don't
your
need us now. They can cheat with the machines. They don't need black folks now.
Exactly right. And the sad part about this, I know we gotta start wrapping up because you've gotta get going here in a minute. But the
Yeah.
sad part about this is it's no different. And look, when people bring up Nazi Germany, they like to, some people, I've got friends that do this. Oh, that's that conspiracy thinking again. The problem is when you think about Nazi Germany, they all talked about how they were there to help, whatever groups of people. Here, we're gonna help you put your name on the list that you are a whatever. And as soon as they took over, they went to use those lists to go after the same people and groups that they promised to help. And I know I'm surmising it and making a long story a much more
Sure,
detailed
and that's all we can
history
really do
shorter.
is in a short amount of time that we have, is to give a broad overview, a broad perspective, and we would require of your listeners that they do their research. Do your own research. Find
Absolutely.
out what's going on. The narrative in America is corruption. We have turned our backs on our Judeo-Christian heritage, and we need to return back to God. That means God's people, biblical Christians, not
That's right.
cultural Christians, need to begin to pray, study that word of God, and stand firm against the pull of Satan to deceive us, to trick us, and to manipulate us into establishing a one world government. Look, I'm sorry I got to go, but I got Bible class tonight.
All right, Pastor. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna end our broadcast. I'll talk to you for 10 seconds afterwards. Everybody else, please. I've scrolled down at the bottom how to find out more about Pastor Broden. We're gonna bring him on again at blacklifemovement.blogspot.com. Check him out there and check him out wherever you can. And please share the video, share the interview. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you.